The national polls were off, actually slightly more in 2012, going the other direction, where they had the race between Obama and Romney closer than the 3 points it ended up being. But the national polls, these national polls you see from the major networks, they're pretty expensive, fairly sophisticated polls. They're not off by much. Where there was an epic poll failure and where people need to be more careful is looking at the state level, the local and state level polling, because a lot of that, some of it's good, but some of it, and this is a technical political science term, is schlock. I mean, it's just garbage stuff that's out there. And, you have to be careful. Now, there is a wall. I mean, the way I characterize this election is like a blue Democratic tidal wave up against a red Republican seawall. And the question is which is going to be stronger, the wave or the wall? In the House of Representatives, in most, not all, but most states, there are Republican-friendly boundaries for Congress, and that's a pretty good-sized seawall that would protect Republican majorities in most of these states, unless the wave was really, really big. Well, this year, the wave looks taller than the wall. So the wall will mitigate some of the Republican losses, but won't really erase them. It's also true to a certain extent state legislative, but also towards the end of the decade, the district lines, when they're first done, they accurately reflect what they were intended to do, but sometimes they kind of gradually get undone over the course of the year.
Can I give viewers one number from the Cook Political Report that may give them a sense of that wave and wall? The House ratings, the Cook Political Report currently has 95 races in play. That means 95 races anywhere from toss-up to leans to likely. 95 Republican races in play. Democratic races in play this cycle, just 13.
Yeah, I mean, you have, sometimes a party has headwinds, sometimes they have tailwinds. This is a year where in the House, Democrats have a tailwind, Republicans have a headwind. In 2010 and 14, it was the other way around. The 5th District in Kentucky, that's really, or 6th District, I'm sorry.
This is the Andy Barr race?
Yeah. That's one of the best races, most competitive races in the country. We have it rated as a toss-up, but it's actually kind of a surprise because this district, which is East Central, Lexington, Frankfort, this is a district that votes in presidential voting 9 points more Republican than the country as a whole. So normally this is not a district that Republicans ought to have to worry about. But Amy McGrath, who is a Marine pilot, she did some ads that went viral on the internet, raised enormous amounts of money and a lot of attention. And so this is a district that, given where the lines were drawn, Republicans shouldn't have to worry about, but it was kind of a unique circumstance. And this is a year where women candidates are doing really, really well, and Democrats have made a point of nominating a lot of women with military records, strong military combat records, and it's worked well for them. I mean, Republicans have some too, like Martha McSally in Arizona.
By the way, you bring up that McGrath ad on Thursday on this program. We're going to be talking about some of the best and worst political ads of the cycle, and that is one of the ads that we've already pulled to talk about that day. So we'll talk about it more on Thursday if you want to tune in. Leah is in Manchester, New Hampshire, Republican. Good morning.
I was just there a month ago at St. Anselm's.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I live right near there. So I'm a college-educated suburban woman, and I agree with you that the Democrats acting like Yosemite Sam, screaming red-faced and shooting themselves in the foot will be the thing that, if it happens, Republicans even gain in the Senate and maybe hold the House, who knows. And just as a few examples here, the propaganda that comes out of the left-leaning news organizations, and it can't be called anything but that because they always print mistakes with huge headlines and then correct them 5 days later, and it's always in one direction. The mistakes are always in one direction. And then you've got the Kavanaugh ridiculousness. I worked in a court for 20 years, and I realized that wasn't a criminal case, The credibility of witness, yes, it can be that you believe only her story and you need nothing else, but you have to believe her story. And when somebody tells you a story that's 30 years old and they remember no details of anything except for one detail, she knows who it was, and all the witnesses that she said were there deny being there, that's not a credible witness.
I'm not here to litigate the Kavanaugh case. I'm just looking at the political impact. So you've got to get another guest who could talk about that. That's not me.
Charlie,
I stay in my lane.
Charlie is in Roslyn Heights, New York, independent. Good morning.
Where's Roslyn Heights?
Hi. The reason, can you hear me?
Yeah, Charlie, where's Roslyn Heights?
How you doing? The reason the Democrats are losing is because they're controlled by the same corporations that are running the Republican Party.
We'll leave Washington Journal at this point to take you live to Fredericksburg, Virginia for a U.S. House debate between incumbent Republican Rob Wittman and Democratic challenger Vangie Williams. This is live coverage on C-SPAN 2.
That was exciting. All right, I will say it again. Introducing Ms. Vangie Williams, the Democratic Party candidate. She currently works as a strategic planner for a government contractor. Her professional specialties include strategic planning and project management, PMO management, and organizational management. She is a graduate of Strayer University. She also earned an MBA in project management from Ashford University. Vangie has been married to her husband Glenn for 25 years, and she is the proud mother of 6 daughters. Thank you for being with us tonight. All right. And now I will introduce our other candidate, which is Congressman Rob Wittman. All right. Our Republican Rob Wittman is tonight's incumbent, having served as Virginia's 1st district congressman since winning a special election in 2007. Prior to his service in Congress, Rob served on the Montrose Town Council for 10 years, with 4 of those years as mayor. He served on the Westmoreland County Board of Supervisors for 10 years, including as chairman, and then about 2 years on the Virginia House of Delegates. During that time, he also worked as a field director for the Virginia Health Department's Division of Shellfish Sanitation. Rob holds a PhD in Public Policy and Administration from Virginia Commonwealth University, a Master of Public Health degree in Health Policy and Administration from the University of North Carolina, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from Virginia Polytech Institute and State University. Congressman Wittman currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee. In that capacity, he is chairman of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee, and he also serves on the House Natural Resources Committee. Rob and his wife, Catherine, live in Montrose. They have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And now, thank you both for being here. And now I will turn the debate over to Dr. Farnsworth, who will give you the rules and begin the debate. Thank you for your attention. Thank you both.
Thank you very much for joining us at this debate tonight. We want to be sure that we have the opportunity to hear the candidates and to see the candidates. And so the rules, and these are rules that have been accepted by both campaigns, require you not to applaud during the individual responses to questions. You'll be able to applaud at the end. If you do engage in demonstrations during the debate, that time will be deducted from your favorite candidate, so it will only hurt them to violate the rules that the campaigns have agreed to. In order to have an unobstructed view of the proceedings for everyone, we have banned signs from the auditorium. If you do have a sign, I'm not going to ask you to leave the room. If you can just keep it at your feet during the debate and not wave it around so that everyone is able to see. The candidates will be given a chance to have 2-minute opening statements and 2-minute closing statements. The order was determined by lot prior to the debate. During the question and answer portion of the program, the candidates will be asked questions by the 3 panelists. I will ask questions that have been submitted in writing by the audience. The candidate who receives the question will have 2 minutes to answer. The other candidate will then have 1 minute to respond. And then that first candidate will have 30 seconds for rebuttal. That's optional if the candidate wishes. And then, of course, the alternating order, the second question will go to the other candidate, and then the other candidate will have 2 minutes, and so on. The campaigns have agreed to these conditions, and so I do encourage you to be on your best behavior, knowing that failing to do so will hurt them. We have timekeepers who will show the candidates how much time remains on their individual commentary. When there are 30 seconds left, the yellow light will illuminate. John, if you would. And then when you're 0 seconds left, the red light illuminates. I'll ask you all to silence your cell phones. And I'm pleased to report we welcome C-SPAN 2, which is covering this event live. So for your friends who can't join us, this will be available online shortly. With that, we turn first to Mr. Wittman, who has 2 minutes for his opening statement.
Well, thank you and good evening. And folks, I am honored and privileged to have the opportunity to represent the great folks in America's 1st District, and that is a true privilege. And you know, I have the opportunity also and blessing to live close enough to where I get to travel home each evening. And I get to ask myself the question on those trips home, going past folks' homes that I've known all my life, and can ask them or ask myself that question of what would they say if I knocked on their door tonight and ask them how things went today? Would they say, hey, Rob, things are going well, or Rob, things could be going better? And that's the connection that I think is extraordinarily important. And as I listen to folks across the district, I hear some common themes. They're adamant about having a strong defense, making sure that we support our brave men and women in uniform, making sure, too, that we have a strong economy, making sure that there are jobs there, not just today, but jobs for our children in the future, and that is emphasizing career and technical education as much as we do college education. Making sure that we're taking care of our veterans, those brave men and women that have served our nation, making sure they get quality care, and making sure it's accessible in every place that they live. They want to make sure, too, that government is accountable, assuring that things get done on time, that we don't have these continuing resolutions, that Congress does those things. And in my efforts to make sure we have simple reforms like my bill called No Budget, No Pay. Pretty simple and straightforward. Don't get a budget done on time, no pay. Making sure, too, we stay on schedule. No August recess unless you get bills done. All those things are extraordinarily important. I'm honored to have the opportunity to represent folks, and they let me know all the time the job that they want us to do, and they want the work of the nation to get done. They're tired of political divisions. They want to make sure that we are listening to each and every one in the district and doing the job that we were elected to do. I am proud of my accomplishments, proud of getting things done, and would ask for your support to continue to serve you here in the 1st District.
2 minutes.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the University of Mary Washington and the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. This debate is important. It's part of our democracy. I am a wife of 25 years, a mother of 6 daughters. They're over here. I am a real-world professional. See, my career has spanned the skies over your head with NASA, and I've worked on underground utilities right below your feet. My career is what my life is. I'm a longtime resident of King George, Virginia, but my family's history spans 350 years in the state of Virginia, in the 1st District. I'm related to nearly everyone in the 1st District, someone told me. But I'm not here to tell you my life story. I'm here to tell you why I'm running for Congress and what I want to do as your Congresswoman. You know, I didn't know that my bid for Congress started 10 years ago, but it did. It started when I walked into the ER with my daughter's lifeless body. And that's a struggle that no parent should have to go through. My husband and I went through our life savings. We lost our home. We filed bankruptcy. But we reached out to Rob Wittman and his campaign, or his congressional office, and we asked for help and got nowhere. But walking through the 1st District, I've learned so much from the people in the 1st District and how they feel and what they want from Congress. I'll tell you what I'm fighting for. An economy that works for everyone. World-class health care, affordable health care for everyone. I want to invest in our hometown heroes and our communities. I look forward to discussing the issues with you tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
The first question goes to Mr. Wittman for 2 minutes.
Congressman Wittman, the Republicans promised that they would repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with something better, yet they have not done so, even though they control the White House and both houses of Congress. Why should voters trust the GOP on health care?
We look at where we are today with the Affordable Care Act, and we know that it hasn't played out the way it was projected to play out. Costs continue to go up. People still can't choose their own provider. They still can't choose the insurance that they need. Those things have to happen. And listen, we need to continue to have the debate to make sure that those things happen. The one thing we look at is I want to make sure that we look at how's this system work. People trust themselves and their doctors to make decisions. They don't want a government takeover of health care. We look at a government takeover, and it's estimated to be $32 trillion. That means trillions of dollars in additional taxes, trillions of dollars in additional debt, going after the Medicare system as it exists today and crippling it. People want to make sure that they are in control. And I can tell you, folks, additional to those impacts is what will happen with timeliness of care. If you look at something routine, but that affects people's lives, something like cataract surgery, and you see where now cataract surgery could take up to 8 to 12 months, we see that not only won't you have choice or control, but it will be long periods of time before you get the care that you need. As I talk to folks across the district, they do want us to fix it. They do want to have that freedom of choice. They do want to make sure that market mechanisms are there for them to be able to choose what's best for them. They do not want a government takeover, and they understand the exorbitant price associated with that. I think those are things that absolutely have to be part of the solution. We have offered those solutions. The House passed its version. The Senate did not. We need to go back and address this. I think that there are elements where we can find agreement to make the system more efficient, but to make sure that the patient and the provider are in control of their own health care outcomes and choosing what's best for them. It's a payer-directed system right now where the payers determine what goes on. I can tell you, as I talk across the district, people want control of their own health care outcomes, and the government takeover of the system would not allow that.
1 minute.
I'm a mother of 6 daughters. You know, we all agree we need health care. It's a human right. My question for Congressman is, do you believe that health care is a human right? You know, it's interesting when we look back at what health care is. It's what we need. I believe in Medicare now with dental and vision because I believe that human beings need that care. But the most important thing is, Rob Wittman has been in Congress for 11 years. Most of it, his party has been the majority. And they have done nothing with health care. Nothing. We we need change, and we need it now. Why? Because we deserve better in the 1st District, not empty promises and not an empty Congress. The 116th would be different.
30 seconds.
We absolutely have to have a healthcare system that does work for everyone, one that preserves being able to purchase insurance regardless of pre-existing conditions, one that allows dependents to stay on their parents' policy up to age 26, and one that doesn't place limits on lifetime coverage. Those are the things that we can all agree upon. Those are the things that absolutely must be the foundation of what goes forward with our healthcare system. I believe that's something we can all get done together, and that's the way that I think we make sure that people have access to the care that they need.
This question goes first to Ms. Williams.
The caravan of Honduran migrants moves closer to the United States. What should the United States do if they reach our border?
You know, this is a very pressing issue. I firmly believe that just like all of the other immigrants that have come to this country, they have to come here the proper way. I know that's not the popular answer with my party, but they have to come here legally. They have to follow the legal means. I know for a fact that we have the opportunity to do something better than what we've been doing. We have to. The Republican Party, I'm going to say it, this administration has set a precedent that's scary for all Americans, not just the undocumented women and men and children in this country, but those entering this country. We have the guidelines. We can do what we need to do. But to worry about how we're going to stop them, we need to figure out how we're going to include people in this country, but again, legally. I'm for a path for residency, but I want to see what our administration is going to do when they get closer to our border. They're, days away. We cannot ponder on what they think they're going to do. We deserve to hear a plan now in this country, and it should be a viable one and a humane one that sets a precedence for future generations, not hostility.
1 minute.
We know by looking at this that our current immigration system is broken. And listen, we're a compassionate nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. And the individuals that are coming towards the United States from Honduras and Guatemala know that the legal means of entry is through a port of entry. And I think the government of Mexico, who we are working with, should advise them to come to the ports of entry so they can enter legally. And we all know, too, that the policy of saying that once they get there, if we don't have the capacity to bring them in, that has to be addressed. The idea of bringing them in and then releasing them doesn't work either. Again, we're a nation of compassion. We can do better than this, and we want to make sure that they are pursuing the legal means by which to come to this nation. That, I think, is key, and we also need to look at the other aspects of our system that are broken, like fixing the elements of chain migration, the visa lottery system, DACA. All those things are things I think we can agree upon across the board. People want us to get that done. That's the result of where we are right now, is not getting those things adjudicated and having both parties look for common ground to make sure that those issues are addressed.
1 minute.
I just have one simple question. With the precedents that this administration has set in the last year, do you, Congressman, agree with the policy of separating children from their parents? Are we going to do that when they get here to this border? Or are we going to do something that's humane and balanced and fair to not only the citizens of this country, but those families who are entering this country thinking that they're doing something great for their family? We have policies. We need to make sure that our guidelines are being followed and not hurting our reputation nation or internationally.
This question goes next to Mr. Wittman. This is a question from the audience. What is your view of climate change, and what should the government do about it? 2 minutes.
I worked as an environmental health specialist with the state of Virginia for 27 years. My undergraduate research work was actually examining Antarctic ice cores to look at what happened in our climate throughout the history of this globe. And I can tell you that There are things that we can find in common. One of the places that we can agree is to make sure, what are we doing to address resiliency? That is to adapt to the conditions that we have before us. We can have the debate back and forth about how much of this is man-made, but the bottom line is this, is we have this reality on our doorstep. And I have worked with Senator Kaine, I've worked with Virginia Institute of Marine Science, I've worked with Old Dominion University to find those places where we can agree. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee. When I chaired the Readiness Subcommittee, one of the elements that we had on the Readiness Subcommittee is to look at what we were doing for military facilities, places like Norfolk Naval Base, like the Air Force Base there at Langley, determining what can we do to make sure that we protect those facilities. That's part of this public policy. There are places where we can agree. We've had great discussions about where that common ground is, about making sure that we do the right thing in the long term. I want to make sure that we are building upon those places that we agree. This issue can be very divisive if you choose to focus on differences. I've always focused on those areas where we can agree, where we can move public policy in the right direction to do adaptation, things that we know we have to do. We know they're to the benefit of our communities. I think if we get those things done, that builds the foundation for us to do other things, to have further public policy discussions about how do we best address this. And I believe it needs to be science-based. Being a scientist myself, having studied this and looking at where we are today, I think making sure that we have that thoughtful, that robust discussion, and where we can start is where we can begin to adapt and look at making our coastal communities resilient. We know that's a place that needs to happen. Let's get that done.
I've said throughout this entire campaign, environmental protection is economic protection for the 1st District. Climate change is real. We know it's real. We have already had record-breaking floods in parts of this district with minor storms, yet alone the big storms just wipe out communities. To deny science of climate change is reckless, correct. But this is something that most of you should know. Mr. Wittman, Congressman Wittman, owns over $50,000 in stock with Dominion. So if he believes that to be true, why would you own stock in one of our major polluters within the district? I also have to let you know, Rob Wittman also has scored an F from the League of Conservation Voters, yet I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club. I look more environmentally sound than he does right now.
30 seconds.
I will stand by my record and the things that I have done for our environment. The Chesapeake Bay Accountability and Recovery Act, a bill that passed while President Obama was president and he signed into law. The North American Wetlands Conservation Act, a bill that I sponsored, a bill that needs to become law. The Land and Water Conservation Fund, the effort that we passed through the House Natural Resources Committee. The Modern Fish Act, where we use science to manage our fisheries. Listen, I will go down through my list of the bills that I have sponsored, the ones that I have gotten through committee and gotten into ultimately legislation. That's the score that I am going to point to, the score where I'm doing the work to protect the resources here in Virginia and across the nation. That's, I think, the most important score.
Warning again about displays.
Ms. Williams, this is also on the health care. When the Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act with no Republican votes, voters were promised that they could keep their doctors, that they would have more choice in insurance, and that each family would save typically $2,500 a year. None of these promises were kept. Why should voters trust Democrats to fix this system that the ACA was supposed to fix?
Oh, well, first of all, I'll tell anybody in the room and I'll tell everyone, I'm not running just as a Democrat. I'm running as an American citizen. I was not in Congress when that was done. But if I had been, I probably would have asked my Republican colleagues to step across the aisle and let's work together. But that did not happen. They did not work with the Democrats. They stood back and watched and made plans to break it down at every opportunity. I embrace common sense medical care for our citizens. That's why I can only talk about what I want. I would love and hope that my Republican colleagues, when we get to Congress, will work on Medicare Now, making sure that families, Medicare Now plus with dental vision, making sure that families across this district have access. You know, living in the Northern Neck, I can tell you, I understand the struggle. To get to a hospital from King George is 45 minutes. Instead of fighting and having the us-them argument, I would have rather have had a discussion with them. But this is where it fares. It comes to campaign finance in a way. See, I'm a realist. I am who I am. I can tell you, I know how much he's accepted from healthcare companies. $500,000, $10,000 in PAC money. So who is he beholden to? The PACs, healthcare companies. I'm beholden to the people of the 1st District in this country to make sure that everyone, regardless of party, regardless of color, regardless of socioeconomic level, has health care so that they can get the care they need. I'm not worried about a party. I'm worried about the people, we the people, because we deserve better.
1 minute.
This is about results, results that help people in their daily lives, results that bring down their health care cost. Health care costs have not come down. Access to health care, more choice in policies so that people don't have to say the better choice for me is not to be insured. That's where we find ourselves today. From the very beginning in 2008, when the entire debate took place, I was there at the forefront. I wrote letters to President Obama asking him to consider what I thought were common sense proposals to fix our health care system. You know what I got back? I didn't even get a response back. I was trying to be constructive with that. 8 principles of care, including making sure that people with pre-existing conditions could buy health insurance, making sure that dependents up to age 26 could stay on their parents' plan, making sure there were no lifetime limits, making sure the system was transparent so you can understand truly what the costs are, giving people choice, giving them control, letting them keep their doctor, letting them keep their coverage. Those things did not turn out to be the case. Those were things I advocated. Those were things that were in your best interest that did not happen because there were no Republican votes on the final passage of the ACA.
30-minute rebuttal, 30-second rebuttal. A reminder that both campaigns have agreed to behavior from their supporters. Both campaigns, in agreeing to this debate, agreed to terms that said people would not demonstrate after each question. And so there will be penalties assessed against these candidates if the campaigns are not, and their supporters are not able to follow the rules that the campaigns themselves agreed to. 30-second rebuttal, if you like.
Thank you. Again, Congressman Wittman has been in office for 11 years. Most of it, his party has been the majority. They couldn't even pass their own health care bill. Why knock one that was working? Even if it wasn't working as great as we wanted it to, we had a foundation we could have built off of. We have to have change. Again, we deserve better.
Your question to Whitman.
Congressman Wittman, do you have a plan to bring more broadband internet access to rural areas of the 1st District?
Yes, I do have a plan. I have worked throughout the district. We've held forums with all the different partners, from the federal agencies to the state agencies to local governments and internet service providers, asking them, what can we do to help? What can we do to build this system out faster? We need this. This is the foundation of local economies, whether it's businesses growing, businesses looking for additional opportunities. It's also critical for our children. For children to have access to the internet, to make sure that when they come home with their tablet computer, that they can connect to the internet to do their assignments so they don't have to get in the vehicle with mom and dad and head to the Wi-Fi center, whether it's at the library or at the McDonald's. It's critical, too, to bring down the cost of health care and to provide access. Telemedicine is one of the most exciting realms that's out there, and I've worked with that when I was in the General Assembly. I work with other members of Congress. We got $680 million in this last budget to put towards unserved areas to build out our broadband system. I think that's critical. I've held forums there to bring together partners on the private side, the internet service providers, to work with localities, to work with the state. I work with my colleagues in the General Assembly to double the amount of money in the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. I work with Governor Northam and his staff to make sure that we are there working shoulder to shoulder on an issue that is nonpartisan, an issue that's in the best interest of our Commonwealth, of our 1st District. I've worked with electric utilities who are doing some pretty amazing things there, using their infrastructure to bring broadband to the region. We have upcoming events where we're bringing those folks together. I will continue to work tirelessly to make sure we have a network of cooperation from the federal level to the state level to the local level to internet service providers to make sure that we have that collection of effort. And in doing that, folks, we will be able to get this built out faster. We need to get to the unserved areas. We need to make sure that it's quality service. We need to make sure that it's there for the future of our children, of healthcare, of businesses. This is one of the most important things that we can do.
1 minute.
You know, I've worked in construction for many years, mainly underground utilities. Broadband is critical to business, to education, and yes, to healthcare. But as it's structured now, regulation is our holdup. One thing I will ensure as your Congresswoman is I want federally funded transportation projects that we can bring broadband to the rural areas. But this is more than just that. See, broadband has been around for 20 years. And the fact that it has just come up on the congressman's poll list, and this is the only reason why he's talking about it, is scary. He's been in office 11 years. Let's do some math. 20 minus 11. You've had plenty of time to work on broadband. Broadband is fundamental to our success. I wanted to know, what happened to the Farm Bill? Why would you vote against or vote for something that has a population density requirement for agricultural companies? We can't win with that.
30 seconds.
My support for broadband goes back to the days when I was in the General Assembly. It was actually my bill in the General Assembly that allowed broadband authorities to be created so counties could come together and actually pursue broadband jointly. We all know counties working together. Regionalism is the way to go about it. You're right, my record goes back further than 11 years. It goes back to my days in the General Assembly and my days when I was on the Board of Supervisors in Westmoreland County, when I worked with the Northern Neck District Planning Commission to look at what we could do to bring broadband to the Northern Neck. Those things are critical. I realized that early on, well before it became an issue later on. My record is strong, a strong record of accomplishments in working to get things done for broadband.
This question goes first to Mrs. Williams. This is an audience question. What can be done about the terrible traffic around Fredericksburg?
Well, what we can do about the traffic around Fredericksburg? Well, if you have not noticed, we have a traffic problem within the 1st District of Virginia and Virginia as a whole. One thing we can do, and I promise I will do, is do a transportation and infrastructure study so that we can figure out how we, as a team, the localities, the state, and the federal government can figure out where we should put money so that we can focus on projects and not do these little piecemeal jobs that cause the backups in Fredericksburg. I can tell you, my main office is in Vienna. Yeah, try that from King George. Takes me 3 hours. But if we do a traffic study on the I-295, I-95, I-64, 301, and Route 1 corridors, we can figure out how to bring commerce to the 1st District and the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula, but we also can figure out how to bring broadband to those areas while we're doing construction jobs and doing underground utilities. And we can figure out how to make our traffic patterns more logical with common sense. Again, teamwork. We need to stop the piecemeal jobs. We need to stop doing what is the next thing on the checklist, but do what makes sense.
1 minute.
I commute every day myself, traveling up to D.C. through the traffic or in the district. I'm as frustrated as each and every one of you are, and I see the things that need to be done. I've been an advocate working with our local transportation authorities to make sure that we are properly funding transportation. In the I-95 corridor, I worked to get American Gateway Project dollars to expand lanes on 95 down to Route 3. I think they ought to go all the way to exit 126 at Massaponax. I've been working with Secretary Valentine and the governor's cabinet to make sure that those things happen. Working not just on things here in this corridor, but in the lower part of the district. Working on things like the Gloucester Bridge to make sure that the Navy is sharing their proportion of the cost of maintaining that bridge, that draw span. Making sure, too, that we are there getting ready to replace the Norris Bridge. Maryland announced just the other day they're going to replace the 301 bridge, which is exactly the same age as the Norris Bridge that goes across the Rappahannock. Same design. We need to get the Norris Bridge replaced instead of spending tens of millions of dollars to paint it and redeck it. Let's spend that money to build a new bridge. Those are the things that I've been working on and advocating, making sure that we have the construction projects to modernize our transportation system. Important for safety, important for our economy.
30 seconds.
I won't need 30 seconds. But you know what? If we had broadband, we could telecommute in the northern neck of the Middle Peninsula and save traffic woes. Don't you agree?
Congressman Wittman, Congress recently passed and President Trump signed a huge $717 billion defense bill. Given the Pentagon's past history with wasting a lot of money, do you think that this was wise, and how will Congress hold the Pentagon accountable and responsible?
I think it is wise. We must support our brave men and women in uniform, and we must defend against the threats that we face around the globe. The good news is this. Secretary Mattis has been emphatic, and this year, for the first time ever, there will be an audit of the Pentagon. The Pentagon absolutely needs to be accountable for those dollars. Those dollars need to go directly towards rebuilding readiness. This year, there was a raise in there for our brave men and women in uniform. They haven't gotten one for years. This provides for them. That's our obligation to do that. It helps us modernize our military so those brave men and women have what they need, that when we ask them to go into harm's way, that they have the things that are needed to fight to victory and come home safe. We owe them nothing less. Our nation has seen our readiness atrophy through the years, and this is an effort to make sure that we rebuild that readiness. In my previous capacity of chairing the Readiness Committee, I went through month after month after month of hearing the reports of where we were being classified as being not ready at all for any of these threats that exist around the world, not just our pure adversary threats, but also threats from terrorism, threats in the cybersecurity realm. This effort was going to help us rebuild that readiness in cybersecurity, in space, with our Navy, with our Army, with our Marine Corps, with our Air Force. All those areas lacking. We had aircraft that weren't ready to fly. In the Marine Corps, we were at a low point where only 46% of aircraft were ready to fly. That's because we didn't have the dollars to put into maintenance. This effort builds those maintenance accounts back up. It allows us to maintain those ships. It allows us to build those ships. It allows us to build new aircraft to replace aging aircraft. By the way, a B-52 aircraft today, the youngest in the fleet, was built in 1962, and the pilot and flight crew that will fly and maintain that aircraft before it's retired haven't been born yet. That's how old our inventory is, and I can tell you, as I visit those brave men and women around the world and the things that they do, the one thing they ask from me is, Rob, please make sure that we are getting what we need. We want to do the job, but we're really stressed in doing the job with the lack of equipment that's in a state of good repair. That absolutely has to happen. Keep it repaired, keep it modernized, make sure they have the training they need. They will do a fantastic job when given the tools to do the job.
You know, back in the 1950s, Eisenhower warned people about growing a military-industrial complex. We're there. We've fallen behind the curve, right? That's what we hear. Yet, there are many military weapons programs that are not pursued but budgeted for. I believe in a balanced budget, one that includes education, one that includes making sure that our children have a future, but also believe in investing in our military men and women, making sure that they can live in this district, in this country, without being below the poverty line. We have men and women, active duty military men and women in this district on food stamps. We have veterans below the poverty line. Oh wait, we have active duty men and women below the poverty line. The scary thing is, we don't have a problem with our military. We have a problem with our congressmen being beholden to corporate interests. We should ask our Congressman Wittman, how does $782,000 sound coming from defense contractors? Who are you supporting, the men and women of this country, the citizens of this country, or those corporations? If they did not give you that money, would you still vote the same way?
30 seconds.
Ultimately, my responsibility is my constitutional duty, Article 1, Section 8, to provide for this nation's military. And I listen to the brave men and women that serve this nation as I travel around. Their constituents in this district, they're at every military base, not only in this district, but across the United States and across the world. And when I go to Afghanistan and visit them, and when I go to Iraq and visit them, and they ask me, they say, Rob, we need these things in order to be able to do our job, I'm listening. When they say, Rob, we need a pay raise, I'm listening. We got the pay raise done. We're providing for them to make sure they get the training they need, to make sure their equipment is properly maintained, to make sure that we modernize. So when they are called upon, when we call upon them to go in dangerous places and do dangerous things, we are firmly behind them. That's a statement for our nation to make, and anything less is a disservice to those brave men and women that serve this nation.
So let me get this straight. We want to focus on our military men and women, but we have men and women in this district who are starving, who have to count on the state to feed them because they can't afford to feed themselves. This is a reality. I've been throughout this entire district, and not because I'm a politician, but because I am an American citizen who wants to see something better for the American people. We need ultimately to look at transforming our military for 21st century threats. Yes, that means upgrading our security and our efficiency of our military. But it does not mean you have to take money from defense PACs. I'm not taking any money from them. I'll be beholden to the military as a citizen, not as a payee.
Next question to Ms. Williams. Student debt, a big concern. Should Congress be involved in the issue? And if so, what would you favor?
Well, being a mother of 6 daughters, I understand student loans. Being a student, I understand student loans. The student loan crisis and the debt situation has gotten completely out of control. Many of you have student loans. Many can't afford to buy a home. They can't afford their utilities. They can't afford to leave their parents' home. Under the current system, colleges and universities simply see students as a way to pay their bills. Well, we need to change the system. There are no incentives for colleges to say, hey, let's educate our students and make them future leaders. It's nothing to say that these colleges are going to help these students get a job once they graduate. We need to start incentivizing colleges to make sure that they're not just collecting tuition, but they're educating these students and giving them an opportunity to find a job once they leave. I can tell you, I know that majority of the students that graduate from Mary Washington are not going to be able to find a job as soon as they graduate. But we're going to change that. We're going to work towards incentives. The whole system needs to be reformed. I can tell you, my student debt is outrageous. You've read about it. I know you have. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not ashamed of it because I'm doing the right thing. Now, what are we going to do on Capitol Hill? We're going to find ways change the system, reduce tuitions, reduce student debt, because we deserve better than that. We're not a country built on student debt. We're a country built on the future. That's not what this is supposed to be like.
1 minute.
As I travel across the First District, I hear the same thing from parents and students concerned about the existing level of student debt. We have to do more to make sure that students and their parents can save. These 521 plans need to have further opportunities for tax exemption to make sure there's more incentive to put dollars away in savings. Those things are critical. One of the things we have to do is to look into the future. Career and technical education is the key. Today as we speak, there's 7.1 million jobs available. 75% of those jobs will not require a four-year degree, but they will require certification or credential. We have to emphasize career and technical education. I had a career and technical education forum today at Germanna Community College. We had folks from across the spectrum, businesses, school systems, all there talking and listening and determining what can we do to make sure we have opportunities for our students to make sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to assume the jobs of the future. That's what we have to do. Equally emphasize career and technical education as we do college track education. That's where our children can be successful, and our job, folks, is to prepare them for success. Our education system must do that. Let's prepare them for the jobs of the future. Career and technical education is the way to do that and keep them from being saddled with tens of thousands of dollars of student debt.
30 seconds.
Well, that's interesting because Mr. Wittman, or Congressman Wittman, supports charter schools. This district can't support charter schools. In the Northern Neck Middle Peninsula, our schools are falling, they're crumbling because we need more money in our education system to build new schools. But one thing I can tell you, being a mother of 6 daughters from ages 12 to 23, yes, we need to start teaching computer skills as early as 2nd grade. We need to start teaching children vocational schools as early as 8th grade or 7th grade. And we need to start making sure that we allow students to start taking college-level courses in the 9th grade so that we can save some of this money and let the kids have an advantage when they graduate from high school so they can go into jobs that they will get money for, actual paychecks, not the minimum wage.
This question goes to Mr. Wittman first. What should the U.S. government response be to the murder of Virginia-based Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi?
First of all, as I think the Saudi government explanation of the murder of Mr. Khashoggi is untenable. It's just not realistic. It is not truthful. The United States needs to hold the government of Saudi Arabia accountable. We need to hold Prince Mohammed bin Salman responsible. I can't imagine that he wasn't in some way, shape, or form connected to this. The government there needs to be held responsible. This administration and, in turn, the Congress needs to make sure we hold them to the highest standard. You cannot have this happen in a civilized world. And yes, we have an important relationship with Saudi Arabia. I want to make sure that we continue to address how we can productively work with Saudi Arabia for peace in the region. But we cannot look the other way when it comes to this heinous human rights violation. And first of all, with them not even acknowledging that it happened is by any measure unacceptable. I think that Congress has to make sure that we are monitoring this. I want to make sure that we get every bit of details. The details that I have so far give me deep concern about Saudi Arabia, deep concern about their actions. I think we need to look at every aspect of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, determine what is the best course forward, how do we make sure that we hold them accountable for this act, and assure that their behavior changes and that people within the government that are held accountable. That's critical. That's what the United States is about, and that must be what happens in not only how the administration addresses this, but how Congress addresses this. So I look forward to those actions in the weeks to come and making sure that we do the right thing.
1 minute.
You all expect us not to agree on that, right? I can't say anything more than that other than what the Washington Post says. Their slogan is, "Democracy dies in the darkness." What Saudi Arabia has done has fractured our faith and humanity from a country who the current administration finds as allies. I'm looking forward to seeing what this a real investigation yields. He deserved better than this to die this way. He was a U.S. resident and a citizen, well, not a citizen, but resident of Virginia. I pray for mercy for him. I know that he's gone, but we all should just say a prayer for his family.
Ms. Williams, you've accused Congressman Wittman of being non-responsive to his constituents, but the nonpartisan Congressional Management Foundation selected his office as one of 2 in the House of Representatives that exhibited the most transparency and accountability. How do you reconcile those 2 different views?
How about this? Who are they? Majority of the people of this district have never heard of this group. You know how I count a congressman or woman as being transparent? It's about being out here talking to people in town halls, meeting with people face to face, not by telephone and selecting questions that they want to answer. That's transparency. You can be anything you want to be on paper with a group, but until you get out and face your citizens face to face and address them one-on-one, you can't say you're transparent. 7 times we've been invited to debates. 7 times we've been told no, until this one and the one coming up on the 25th. If you are transparent, you will be amongst these people, not just the people who agree with you. I will say this, I'm not running to be the liberal congresswoman. I am not running to be the conservative congressperson. I am running to be the congresswoman of everyone in the district, whether I like what you say or not. The whole purpose of this seat is to go to Capitol Hill and represent each person as their representative, as a person, not as a party. That's what transparency is. I've been out here. I've spoken to thousands and thousands of people. That I take as a reward, not a piece of paper.
1 minute.
Folks, my job is to be out there listening. I'm very proud of that award because, indeed, the Congressional Management Institute is an independent body, a nonpartisan body. But it's more than that. It's about what I do each and every day to connect with constituents across the district. Since 2017, we've had 1.8 million voter contacts. That's with everybody across the spectrum. We've had over 100 separate town halls of small groups where we can take the time to answer people's questions, to talk in depth about issues, to make sure that we have a complete understanding and a constructive dialogue back and forth. That's the way our system's meant to operate, and I am very proud of getting out there and being accessible anywhere. I've had people stop me in the grocery store, people stop me in Lowe's to talk about issues. I am always available 24/7. There is no limit on the time that I am available, and they're wanting to take people's comments, listening to people, and understanding their concerns. Those things I think are absolutely critical, and it's the foundation of how I operate. This is about service. I've always been about serving others, putting them first, and that's the mantra of how I serve.
30 seconds.
You ever heard of the term hidden figure? Majority of the people in this room have never seen Congressman Wittman's face before today. That's not transparency. That's being a hidden figure. I want to be here with you.
Congressman Wittman, cybersecurity, how safe are we and what more needs to be done?
Cybersecurity is an extraordinarily important part of what we need to do with national security. If you look at the challenges we have around the world, they are many. And one of the places where I have the biggest issue is countries like China. China who will steal our intellectual property. They continue to attack our systems each and every day. Russia the same way. Those things are concerning, and it's not just attacking our national security systems, it's attacking our businesses. It's attacking our industrial infrastructure. All those things are critical. I've had conversations with public utilities, including water systems, including power companies, about what can we do to work together? What can we do to share information so we understand where these attacks, what can we do to protect our nation? We can and must do more. This year in the National Defense Authorization Act, we actually put additional resources in direction of what we're doing in the cybersecurity realm, making sure that we have the necessary effort, making sure that we have the cybersecurity professionals there, making sure that starts in our education system. That's another place where career and technical education can be extraordinarily helpful to make sure we have students, not just those college track students, but folks that are network engineers that can really understand how to get in there and work on that. Those, I think, are critical. Training needs to happen within our military. I think at the very basic level of training, as members of the military come in, it needs to start in basic training. It's great to understand the tactics of your job, but understanding what you can do to make sure you protect our nation. Everybody today has a smartphone. Our members of the military have to understand that that is a threat. What can they do to make sure that they are not exposing our military and in turn our nation to threats from others? Those are things I think need to continue. Training is an important element of it. Hardening our systems electronically and digitally to make sure that those things, as far as the impacts of attacks, don't happen. Making sure, too, that we design in preventions and make sure, too, that we have a strong and offensive capability, that is to hold our adversaries at risk so they have to expend their resources to protect their system so they can't spend all their time attacking our systems. I think that's critical, and that's part of a good balanced policy. We've done a lot in this year's National Defense Authorization Act, but we still have more to do.
Well, it's simple. The U.S. government does not focus on cybersecurity. This congressman focuses on our fleet. I want to focus on our security, our cybersecurity, our voting protection. I want to focus on making sure that we're not hacked every opportunity that comes around. So yes, it goes back to educating our students, our military, our adults, making sure that families, our military, our adults understand what's at risk. I support spending, government spending, on a basic research for technological development. That means I want to know how can we be better at what we aren't doing, not what we're doing wrong. Going forward, we have to look progressively at what this country needs to build our cybersecurity infrastructure. If we keep worrying about what's happening in the seas, we're going to keep missing out. I'm not saying we don't need a stronger fleet out in the seas, but we need to protect our electrical grids, our voting systems, because we have another election coming up. Are they going to do it again?
30 seconds.
Folks, I am confident in our United States military. I am confident that they can do all of this, that they can rebuild our Navy to make sure we have presence around the world to protect our nation, to make sure that anybody that thinks about acting badly doesn't do that. That is the insurance for a safe world. We can do that at the same time that we build a critical infrastructure for cybersecurity to make sure we have the systems and the skilled individuals to protect our nation, to build a strong Army, to build a strong Marine Corps, to make sure we have a strong Air Force, to modernize that. All of those things are critical. We can't just do one. We have to do all of them if we're truly going to have the military necessary to protect this nation.
This question goes first to Ms. Williams. What should the U.S. response be to Russian activities in U.S. politics and its continued occupation of part of Ukraine?
Repeat that again.
What should the U.S. response be to Russian activities in U.S. politics and its continued occupation of part of Ukraine?
You know, over the last few years, I think we have spoken about Russia more than we should ever have had to. We need to build up. I'm going to change that. Looking at what has happened in the last 2 years has broken my heart. I'm an American citizen, and my focus has always been on the American people. And what happened during our elections is deplorable. What should we do about Russia and Ukraine? How about we let Congress do their jobs and get involved? The 115th Congress, predominantly Republican, has stood in the way of every investigation, has made it clear that they don't believe Russia's doing this or Russia's not doing that. Stand up for your American values. Do what you're supposed to do. Protect us. Be the leaders that we are. What I see happening right now across the world is deplorable. And our administration is not stepping in where it's needed. Instead, we're causing havoc in our own home. I'm not going to say we. The administration is causing havoc in our own homes. We need to look here first. While we are not Ukraine, I'm not saying that we should not be involved, but we have too much going on here. I'm not looking at the issues of the day. I'm looking at everyday issues for the citizens of the 1st District. Until I get up on Capitol Hill, there's nothing I can do but watch, like Rob Wittman.
Folks, this is an issue that we've seen through the years, their effort to annex Crimea, their aggressive behavior in Ukraine. All of those things we know are unacceptable, and we have focused on that both in the National Defense Authorization Act, the things we've done from a policy perspective, but Congress has also pursued sanctions against Russia. I think those are things necessary to hold Russia accountable, to make sure that diplomatically we are putting pressure on them, telling them that this is absolutely unacceptable. As you know, they operate in Ukraine by proxy. We know what's happening there. We know what Vladimir Putin is doing to try to destabilize that region. I have been to the Baltic states, and we know the things that are happening in the Baltics. They are very, very concerned about Russian aggression in the area. We not only need to be addressing Crimea and Ukraine, but preventing the same type of things to happen in the Baltics. That means engagement. That means going to those countries and visiting, talking to the leaders there, understanding what can we do to work with them. Like the European Reassurance Initiative, the effort that Congress is taking place to say, we're going to make sure we help our allies in Europe, our NATO allies, to prevent aggression by Russia. Those are the things we've done. Those are the things we need to continue to do to push back against Russian aggression.
30 seconds.
Congressman Wittman, the federal war on drugs under both Republican and Democratic administrations has been, I think it's fair to say, a total failure. What do you think that Congress should be doing now to battle this epidemic of not only opioids, but also drugs coming across our southern border?
Just several weeks ago in Stafford County, we had an opioid abuse forum where we brought together folks from the Community Services Board, the local health department, the Sheriff's Department, parents who suffered through seeing their children addicted, some of them ultimately passing away from that addiction from overdoses. And listening to them and those heartfelt stories, it's very clear to me that this is an effort that needs to start at the local level. Congress has devoted about $10 billion towards opioid abuse issues and making sure that we are battling this epidemic. Recently passing the Support Act, which is an effort that goes and combines 50 different opioid abuse bills to really make sure we're addressing this comprehensively. That passed overwhelmingly in both bodies, making sure that we are addressing the underlying causes of addiction, making sure we have prevention and treatment, making sure we're working with law enforcement to help them, making sure we're battling fentanyl that's coming in the country. What's happening on the dark web now, where you can go to the dark web and buy fentanyl from China. Those things are absolutely critical for us to address. The Support Act addresses all of those issues, puts the necessary resources, but the most important part about it is it puts those resources down at the local level. It allows local governments to determine solutions. Like Sheriff David Decatur here in Stafford County, working with him, he said, Rob, we need more money to go to drug courts so we can adjudicate these cases to make sure that we give an opportunity for an individual to seek treatment rather than be incarcerated. We cannot incarcerate our way out of this. Janine Lawson, supervisor there in Prince William County, we had an opioid abuse forum there in Prince William County where we talked to law enforcement and families, and they gave us the stories of the things that we could do to address this issue. It's local-based solutions, making sure we understand the true depth of this addiction and what we can do to help people, both in education and prevention side, helping law enforcement deal with it, helping first responders, making sure we keep those drugs off the street, but making sure, too, that we don't look at this as a law enforcement issue. This is a health issue. The addiction is a physical addiction where you have chemical changes in the brain. Let's address that and make sure that we are focusing resources to address that physical addiction, and I think that we can be successful with that.
1 minute.
This is a serious topic, but opioids aren't the only drugs out there that are addictive. There are many types of substance abuse. I personally understand that from family members who have had substance abuse and addictions. The fact is, yes, this is a major health care issue because a large part of this is mental health. The reason why I say that Medicare Now ++ is important, because in communities where there is no health care, there is no mental health care. We need to educate not only providers, but families to know the signs. Now, Congress has had plenty of opportunity, and they throw money at a problem. But throwing money is not the answer here. It's education, it's health care, access to quality health care, making sure that we incentivize professionals to come forward and help our citizens. It's a shame that you have to go to jail to get treatment for any type of substance abuse. We need to change our systems, and we need to start locally with the states so that we do this as a team and stop just throwing money at a problem.
The Congress recently passed the 21st Century Cures Act, which directs resources towards behavioral and mental health specialists. There's a shortage of them in the country. We absolutely need to make sure our education system is providing those professionals so they can help at every level. And it's not just in our communities, it's also within our veterans communities. Look at what's happening with the suicide rate. Look at what's happening with addiction within our veterans communities. Those are things we absolutely have to address. The Congress, through the VA Mission Act, has put more resources there. These are all things that have to happen. That fabric of complete addressing of this issue from the standpoint of treatment and getting the professionals there to do that are critical. Congress is on the way to getting those things done.
Ms. Williams, for you, are the Trump administration tariffs working to improve the U.S. economy? Why or why not? And if not, what should Congress do?
I am a child of the Northern Neck. His tariffs have hurt farmers across this country. The Trump administration released, after putting tariffs in order, a $12 billion farm aid package. Prices on crops crept up. I know my family was hurt and affected deeply because who are they going to sell their goods to? This wasn't just my family. These were farmers across the country. This $12 billion bailout was a quick fix to a problem that we didn't have before. Rob Wittman could have stood up against the president and say, hey, these tariffs are too much. This is not right. What are you doing? Help us. He went on Fox News on June 10th, 2018, and made excuses for this administration's policies. When the chips were down, Rob Wittman didn't fight for the farmers in this district. We deserve better.
Folks, from the very beginning on tariffs, I have been forthright in saying that I have deep reservations with tariffs, especially as it relates to our agriculture and our manufacturers. I've traveled across the district and talked to them and said, listen, what are the impacts? And many of them have said, listen, we're asking for exemptions because it affects our businesses. I've talked to farmers across the district and looked at the things that we could do to be able to help them. Yes, these things have far-reaching effects, but let's not forget what China is doing to our nation. The intellectual property theft, the things that they're doing in unfair trade practices, the things that they're doing to manipulate currency, all those things also affect our economy, affect businesses here. So we have to make sure we're looking at the full spectrum. Listen, I'm not a fan of tariffs. I think there are other ways to go about it. And we must be looking at all the different options on the table. The president chose to take this one first. I've been adamant to say that, listen, I have a different vision about this. The president's taken that action, and he believes it's going to be effective. I think time will be the ultimate judge of that. But things we're doing to help our farmers today, including the recent agreement between Canada and Mexico, great opportunities for agricultural products, as well as the European initiative that now allows our soybeans to be sold there. So I think all those things collectively are moving things in the right direction.
That's interesting, because the new version of NAFTA, really, we're not sure if that corrected any of these trade policies between Canada and Mexico. But I do agree, with majority of the population in here, that long-term harm will be done to our agricultural communities, because part of this tariff will not be recouped in the next few years. This is a short-term bailout. What happens to the farmers of the 1st District after the tariffs are gone? The bailout is gone. And second, do the farmers that you take money from, do they know that you have not come out forcefully and spoken up against the tariffs? Not just, I'm kind of adamant. Lead us. If you're going to be a leader, lead us. I'm running for Congress because I'm ready to lead us to prosperity in this district, not make promises. I'm going to fight for us, we the people.
This question goes next to Mr. Wittman. Several states are currently facing legal challenges over their efforts to change voter registration rules. Should the states continue to be responsible for registering voters, or is this something that the federal government should take responsibility for?
I think managing the voting system is a responsibility of each state, because there are different aspects of voting systems. There are federal elections, but there are also state and local elections, and I think that states need to be intricately involved in that. As you know, in Virginia, it's the state that's involved with the State Board of Elections, but it's local election boards with local election officials connected, understanding what's happening on the ground. I don't want to have it as a single point in Washington where it's a one-size-fits-all. I think our local governments, through local elections boards and through state governments, through the Virginia Board of Elections, have the ability to understand the system, to manage it properly, to make sure we understand what's going on, making sure that they are accountable. I'd much rather have somebody in the state of Virginia and in my county accountable for an election system that works, where I can go to them and talk to them. What's happening with ballots? How does this OpScan machine work, rather than saying, well, this is a federal agency and somebody from the federal agency isn't even here. You know, it's that local connection that I think makes individuals much more accountable and assures that the citizenry can have that transparency and understanding about how this system works. To me, that's been the foundation of our system all the way back to the origins in this nation. It has worked when there's been threats. The federal government does have a role to say, let's help you identify threats. Let's get information to state governments and local governments about how they can combat those threats. But ultimately, the accountability and transparency is best at the state level and the local level. I love being able to call the State Board of Elections and talk to them about what's happening. To go to my local registrar and say, what's happening with voter rolls? What's happening with this election? What are you doing to address threats that we've heard about? I think that's exactly the way the system needs to work. I think it's worked well, and I'd like to see it continue to work that way. A one-size-fits-all solution from Washington is not the solution to make sure we have accountability and transparency in our voting system.
1 minute.
Well, Virginia is pretty good at making sure that they are accountable for our voting systems. I am very pleased with that. But since voting is a function of the state, I'm proud to say that our state does not have some of the guidelines that are going on, like in Georgia, with the voter suppression. I do think we need some type of national voting system, one that can make sure that voter integrity is there. One of which One that we could do possibly is do automatic voter registration upon the age of 18 and teach children the civic responsibility starting when they graduate. It would be really nice to have more than just half of the population vote in an election because they don't have the proper ID or they don't have the proper, or if they don't have transportation like in the Northern Neck. But if we make sure that 18-year-olds have that availability and know they have that possibility, we could possibly have some of the greatest voting counts in the nation coming up.
Ms. Williams, some leaders in your party have promised that if they take the House majority, that they will start impeachment proceedings against President Trump and/or Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. If you're elected to Congress, would you join in those efforts?
I'm not going to Congress to follow. I'm going to Congress to lead. First thing I want to know is, what is the outcome of the investigation? I'm not going to make a choice on impeachment without hearing all the evidence. That's nonsense. That's not the American way. I'm going to Capitol Hill as an American first. I am not going to discuss impeachment of anybody because until we have a full investigation, it's nonsense.
I believe transparency is the key. I do not believe that information that we have to this point in any way, shape, or form leads to an assumption of high crimes and misdemeanors. This is a very high standard in the Constitution, and it's about looking at the Constitution and applying the Constitution. And I will unwaveringly measure any determination about impeachment of anyone by the high standards in our Constitution.
With that, we'll turn in a moment to closing statements. But before we do that, I want to thank the many people who made this event take place. And now I'll suspend the limits on applause. You'll be able to applaud for your candidates after their closing statements. But I also want you to join me in thanking the University of Mary Washington student government, including the College Republicans and the Young Democrats. Thanks as well to our co-sponsors, the Fredericksburg Area Chamber of Commerce and the Freelance Star, to Ted Schubel and Barbara Hollingsworth, my fellow panelists, and above all to the candidates. It's not easy to run for office, it's not easy to ask questions, and it's not easy to answer them, but they're willing to serve, and they both deserve our gratitude for putting themselves forward tonight. I want to thank as well Douglas Snowville and his team who made this event happen here in Dodd Auditorium, and to the students who were timekeepers and question assessors, Stephen Lamb, Shania Peterson, John Cronin, Julia Gibbons, and Jeremy Engel. Thanks to all of you. And with that, each candidate has 2 minutes for the closing statements. Mrs. Williams goes first, and you're free to applaud after each of the closing statements.
I guess no reclamation of time, right?
2 minutes.
Again, I want to thank Dr. Farnsworth, Ms. Hollingsworth, and Dr. Schugel for moderating this. This was a great opportunity. And I want to thank Mary Washington. Thank you so much for hosting this event. I think it's important for people of this district to hear a vigorous discussion and a debate. It's what this country is made out of, conversation. As far as I'm concerned, the theme that rings true for me and so many is we deserve better. Like John, a 92-year-old veteran. He's 92. He's fought in 2 wars. And he walks up and down his street, visiting his neighbors so that they can feed him. He deserves better. Or Mary, who walks 7 miles to and from work because she has no car, to work a part-time job to help her mother take care of her disabled brother. Or Cheryl Ann, Congressman Wittman met her during a town hall in Stafford. He promised Cheryl Ann he would not vote against the pre-existing condition provision of the ACA, and he did. That broke her heart, and it broke so many of our hearts who heard that town hall. She deserved better. Or how about me? I reached out to Rob Wittman's office and I asked him for help after my daughter Lilia became very ill. It was 11 years ago, and in 11 years, it's been silence for so many people in the room. We all deserve better. Congressman Wittman has been in office for 11 years, and he's managed to pass only 5 pieces of legislation while accepting over 2,000 checks that aren't from people. Things have to be better for people in the 1st District. Commuter times are longer. Broadband is still the dream for some. Health care is more expensive, and veteran and military families are still living in poverty in the 1st District. It's time we had a leader in the district who talks to everyone, whether they agree with them or not, because that's the kind of dialogue that brings communities together. It's time we had a leader who's focused on getting results from the government and not picking up campaign checks from PACs and corporate CEOs. It's time we had a leader who stood up and fought for what's right and not just rubber stamp with the party, his party. It's time we had people to stop allowing ourselves to be held hostage by this political back and forth. Congressman Wittman, you have had 11 years to serve we the people, and we the people are tired of waiting. It's time for someone to step up, me, and serve the 1st District, because we deserve better. And with all due respect, Congressman Wittman, your time is up. I'm Vangie Williams, and I'm running for Congress. And again, I'm not running to be the liberal congresswoman or the conservative congresswoman. I'm running to be your congresswoman, because this race is your race, not his, not mine, but yours.
Let's move to Congressman Wittman. Mr. Wittman, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I also want to thank the University of Mary Washington, the Fredericksburg Chamber of Commerce, the Freelance Star. Ted, thank you so much for all that you do. Ms. Hollingsworth, thanks so much. Dr. Farnsworth, thank you. What a great display of what our nation's all about, our republic, where we can freely exchange ideas, understanding that the foundation of this nation is all about you placing your trust in individuals to represent you. Nights like tonight where we exchange ideas is exactly what this is all about. My father, who was a World War II veteran, instilled in me to make sure that I was about service in everything that I've done. From the very day I left school, working for the state of Virginia, serving locally in government, giving of my time, whether it was in Boy Scouts, whether it was in civic organizations, those things are the very essence of who I am and what I believe my service has been all about. I'll give you a story. I was with a gentleman in Lowe's. I was just talking to him about another issue with something in the paint department. And I said, hey, how are things going? He says, well, now that you ask, he said, you know, I've had an issue. I was released from my job at the federal level, and I think I was released unjustly. And I said, tell me more. How do we help? He described his situation. I said, you're absolutely right. You did not receive due process. I will make sure that we go to work and help you and get those things done. I pride myself in every situation to be your servant, to serve at your command, to do the things that you ask for me to do. And we receive thousands of requests every year, and every one of them we hold equally instead for the things that we need to do to serve you. Again, This job is about service. It's about being a servant leader and about having the record of doing that. I can tell you, in the 1st District, I put people first, put your concerns first in everything that we do, from things that happen in Washington, to traveling across the district, to listening to the current concerns that each and every one of you have, to taking those concerns to Washington, to turning that into legislation to help you, to make sure that we work for federal agencies, whether it's Social Security, whether it's the Veterans Administration, to make sure that we are working on your behalf. Every fiber of my being has been throughout my life about service. And that is instilled in me from my very first days on this earth from my parents. To me, that's absolutely critical. And it's a true honor for me to serve you. I ask that you give me the honor and privilege to continue to serve you. I ask